Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Your Soul Revolution. I am so excited for our guest today, Alexandra Cole. She is a former corporate consultant turned human design coach. After a decade of helping Fortune 500s identify and articulate their why, she pivoted to help individuals, families, and couples do the same. She uses human design as a tool to help her clients pursue their purpose with more clarity and confidence. Alexandra is passionate about translating insights from her clients' human design charts into actionable strategies for optimizing their relationships, well being, careers, finances, and family life. She was born in London, raised in Amsterdam, educated at Princeton, and now lives in Santa Barbara with her husband and 3 year old son and almost 6 month old daughter. Becoming a mother inspired her to create Thriving by Design, a collection of tools, cheat sheets, and online courses designed to give parents insight into their child's unique sensitivities, preferences, and gifts, as well as tactical tips for how to support them. Alexandra is happiest when moving her body, eating good food, exploring new places, and in deep conversation with new or old friends. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And as you just described, I love deep conversations. So I'm really excited to be here on your soul driven podcast.
Yeah, I always say like I I feel like the podcast was part selfish because I just get to have conversations with amazing people and I'm like, is this my job? Like
Well, that's the best reason to do something, right? If it's like truly you feel like you're doing it for yourself, I don't think we do enough of that just in general. So if that's the main motivation, it sounds like it's super aligned.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk more about that today, I'm sure. Um, so to start us off, like share how human design came into your life. Like obviously you did a 180-degree turn from corporate America, and although it's similar, like with the theme of purpose and like why still throughout, but like how did it find you? How did you know it was the thing? And like how did it lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, I always say, like, if my former self, if my 20, maybe 2 year old self had seen what I was doing right now with my life, they would have laughed out loud because this is so far from kind of where I used to be and what I had imagined my life would look like. Well into my 30s now. So I would say that, even though I'd always had a little bit of a kind of spiritual curiosity growing up, I felt a lot of pressure to pursue the path of least resistance, which was kind of the very stable, safe, predictable path in life. So I studied in the States. From there, at least the college that I went to, everyone ended up going into either banking or consulting. So I honestly didn't even pause to think what I really wanted. I just kind of jumped on that train. And I found myself on paper at a amazing job, living in New York City, making a good living, having zero time to do anything outside of work, though, to fill my cup. And one day, a close friend of mine came along and she started talking about this company that she wanted to create. And I helped her brainstorm. Soon we were meeting before my job, after my job. And it was so much fun to just kind of, I don't know, dream up what this could be. And it was this idea for a company that would help old school legacy brands better understand our generation of consumers. And that felt like such an important mission to me that before I knew it, I was quitting my job and jumping into this without a second thought. And I made that move, which was a big deal because I was a foreign citizen. So there was a lot of kind of visa things that came into play. But it was probably 6 months after that I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? I completely, just turned my life upside down and, took a hard or left turn off of this like predictable path that I had imagined myself pursuing. What was it that enabled me to do that? Because I was so convicted in that move that I didn't feel like I needed to question it. And so I went on a little bit of a like personal development. I don't want to call it like a quarter life crisis, but looking back, that was probably what this was. In a kind of desire to want to explain what allowed me to do that with so much kind of confidence and conviction. And I'd always loved personality tests. So that was kind of the first place that I looked. And I did all the kind of more well-known ones like Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram. And then I remember listening to a podcast and they mentioned something called human design. So I filled in my birth details and out pops this chart and I started researching it. And for some reason, it lit something up in me that explained just, again, not just why I had made that jump, because it turns out it was very much aligned for my kind of emotional and sacral centers, guiding me to exactly that moment in time. But it just was me on paper in the most unfiltered way. Like it stripped away all of the kind of personas or masks that I felt pressure to wear, and it just showed me. And it was so confronting and freeing at the same time that I couldn't get enough. And so I started just diving into this system more for my personal growth and development and curiosity. And fast forward maybe 2 years after that, I kind of hit a bit of a block in that other company that I'd started, and that I just wasn't lit up by the work anymore. And I felt a little burnt out because we'd been grinding. And I ended up taking a little sabbatical where my husband and I moved to Bali for a month. And my intention for this month was I'm going to take a human design certification training and just like go all in on my own experiment. So I did that and started maybe like dabbling in doing readings for other people. Again, not thinking it would ever go anywhere. And when I came back, I told my husband, like, I'm going to explore this as a side hustle. So I put together a website. I would like post here and there on Instagram, but like nothing, consistent. And then 2 weeks after we got back to the States, COVID hit and the world shut down. And suddenly I'm at home with tons of extra time. And all of these people out there in the universe were looking for a purpose and trying to adjust to this new normal and having these big existential kind of questions and crises come up. And so I just trusted this kind of ping that I received to keep doing more of those sessions. And over time, it grew into something pretty significant. And I have just continued to become more and more obsessed with this amazing tool, just by the nature of how much it's transformed my life and relationships. But especially now, I get to see every day how transformative this system can be for other people, and just giving them permission to be more of themselves and let go of all the stuff that I just talked about, like all the masks and the pressures that we inevitably pick up on, in order to find more ease and fulfillment in life. And like the fact that I get to do that for a living is crazy. But yeah, that's how human design found me and probably is never going to let go.
I love that you said found me, because I do believe like the things that are meant for us find us. And like I was actually listening to one of like Jenna Zoe's podcasts recently, and she talked about how there was like no such thing as bad timing, and like that you just have to like be on the platform and the trains will come, and like you may miss the first, you may miss the second, you may miss the first five, but like you'll get on the train. All you have to do is like be on the platform. And I think like it really, like you said so beautifully, it comes back to what do we need to shed? What do we need to subtract to see who we've always been, and like who the world told us we should be or who we thought we were? And how can we just get back to like the purest form of us, the soul that's like underneath that? And I think that's what it does. It just like human design, it's like we shouldn't need the proof, but it is a beautiful tool to
Oh,
help us get
I
there.
know. Well, that's the thing. It's so often in my sessions with people, they're like, you're telling me things that deep down I know, and yet I needed a stranger, a third person to validate it for me to actually lean in. And this is also why I often say that for me, becoming a mom led me to fall in love with human design all over again, because when you look at little kids, if I look at my children and I look at their human design chart, they're one and the same. They are these like living, breathing reflections of their chart, down to, right, like how they digest their food and how they, come into a space of ease and their whole nervous system relaxes in their correct aligned environment. Like all of these little things are so spot on. And it really does just show you that we were once fully aligned. And then we, are put in different like circumstances, whether it's kind of your family of origin, the school you go to, the culture you grow up in, that inevitably is going to put pressure on you to do things in a certain way. There's so much pressure to conform to this kind of homogenous way of being. And at the end of the day, I think human nature is that we want to belong. We want to be loved. That's what we crave. And so we pick up on this story that in order to be loved and in order to belong, we need to live up to these expectations that we're seeing modeled outside of ourselves. And that, when you've been experiencing that for multiple decades, like you are when you get to be our age, it's really hard to undo it, even though that like little free differentiated child is obviously still inside of all of us. And we hear it, like we hear them speaking to us in little glimpses here and there. It's just that, we've been so conditioned to ignore the voice or shut it down.
Yeah. I think it's like Einstein, there's a quote like the world has taught us to like value like the mind instead of the intuition, and the intuition is the gift, but like the world's told us to value
Yes.
the mind instead. And I it's just like for me the thing I'm like always floored every time like I learn something new or repeatedly learn something. It's just like I feel like human design puts words and like you said validation or explanation to things that I like knew but couldn't explain.
Yes. And I think why I love it so much, it's that it's one of the few systems that I think brings together kind of the woo spiritual world of astrology and Kabbalah and energy with this very practical output in terms of like how to be more effective, like in work, as a parent, in relationships, and so forth. So that piece, but two, I think the fact that it's a framework and a system is so helpful for me as a practitioner. And perhaps this is because I'm a 5-1 profile, which in human design means you're someone who is here to universalize stuff, right? Like I'm here to take things and make it as applicable and practical for as many people as possible. And also my primary gift in human design is the gift of creating formulas. And so I love frameworks and systems. And so what you said about like it almost gives you this language to articulate stuff that you know in your bones is true, but is hard to give a voice to. I feel that way about like being able to read a blueprint or a map to a person's like essence and soul is like
Mm.
so amazing. But I need that like legend. Like I need the piece of paper in order for it to, for me at least, to confidently do this work. I don't have the ability like many amazing energy workers to just do it based on an aura. Like I need that roadmap and that framework. Somehow it legitimizes it for me in a way that clearly my mind still needs. I'm not evolved enough to let go of that piece.
Yeah, no, I understand. Like I think too, not only like for you potentially, but other people, when you have like something tangible you can explain versus some like woo energy thing that again gets to the same result, but it's a little harder to explain or prove out maybe, then like more people get on board more
Yep.
easily.
100%. Yeah. Even though there's still like a I mean, I get the question all the time, like, what is the origin story? Which is a completely insane story, to be honest. It was fully channeled by a man in Ibiza who was definitely on a lot of drugs. Like, you can look all of that up. And I always have to come back to, but to me, the proof is in the pudding, in the sense that I've done like thousands of sessions with people. And the accuracy of it is wild, but I think more importantly, the value that people get out of it. If someone told me, "Oh, this is all made up tomorrow," I would still want to do this work because it gives people an excuse to reflect and to build their self-awareness. By me telling them, like, this is what your chart is saying, it's at a minimum asking them to kind of reflect on that, and does this feel true or not to me? um, and so, again, it doesn't really matter to me what the story of origin is, and like whether this is valid or not, because the impact is undeniable. Like the value that it provides people is, like, I've seen it now so many times that I am utterly convinced of kind of the magic that can happen when someone is given permission to just be their truest self.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so like I feel like people, like you said, everyone always asks like what is human design? Like you've already alluded a bit, a combination of things, but like what I want to ask you is like why should people care? Like do you have people you come across that like barely even have ever heard the word and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, like why for our listeners who like don't really know what it is or like yeah I've heard about it but like it's just another personality test or whatever like why should people care about human design?"
Okay, for so many reasons, obviously, but if I came across a person like that, I would probably explain that the whole premise of human design is differentiation. So it's often called the science of differentiation because the belief is we were all born with this one of a kind, unique, energetic makeup. And that was based on where all the planets were that exact moment in time you took your first breath, which created this like unique energetic frequency on earth. And that's science, right? Like everything is energy. This energetic frequency is actually measurable. Now the leap of faith is believing that you were somehow like impacted, influenced, or imprinted by that particular frequency. But if you believe in this, it means that everyone is really designed to move through the world in their own unique way with their own set of preferences and sensitivities and interests, right? And interact with others in their own unique way. And so because the world puts so much pressure on us to conform, it inevitably leads to the vast majority of us walking around in a very compromised manner. And what I mean by that is we've kind of, shut down certain parts of our authentic self in order to fit in. And as a result, you are going to meet like resistance in many different shapes and forms. So if you are someone who's moving through life and you think, I feel like there's more that I could be doing. Like I feel like I'm not living my potential. Or if you're moving through life and you're like, why do I keep running into the same negative patterns or habits over and over again and I can't seem to get out of it, right? Like why do I keep meeting the same men or that aren't healthy to me? And why do I keep getting jobs that don't end up working out? Or why can't I manifest the things that I really want? Like all of those are examples of resistance. Like the universe is actually trying to tell you, you took a wrong turn. You need to like backtrack and start to honor your unique energetic blueprint and frequency and become less of what the world told you to be and become more of yourself. And when we're able to do that, it's like this unlock that happens. And suddenly you are moving through life in a way that feels not just lighter, but it feels more easeful and effortless and purposeful because your ability to live out your purpose is literally contingent upon you following that blueprint. And so that's the other piece that why do it? Because you're never going to feel truly fulfilled and on purpose unless you understand the way you are meant to move through the world. And your purpose through the lens of human design, as you know, it's not a particular job or vocation. That's not what I mean by it, but it's a particular energy that you are here to bring to the world. And in order to figure out what that energy is, you've really got to kind of strip away those layers through a self-awareness practice. And you can use different modalities to get there. I'm not saying human design is the only one, but to me, I found it to be one of the most effective ones to do that work.
Yeah, like shortcut. I'm like, okay, well, I got here
Shortcut.
the hard way, but like, you
Yeah.
should use this.
And the amazing thing about this too is like it gets into so much detail about how you're like what I love about it and why I also think human design is a system that works really well for a lot of people is that it literally tells you how you are designed to communicate, make decisions, eat, sleep, play, learn in the way that is most natural and easeful for you, not based on what's worked for the average person out there, but like for you specifically. Like how cool is that to be able to receive a blueprint to, how you're designed to be most effective?
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm like, have so many questions. I don't know where I want to start. Okay, let's start with basics, right? Because the thing for me, so I was in a corporate job for 15 years, and I think like realistically about 10 years in, I was like, this isn't meant for me. Like it was about the time where I was like questioning why I was following this checklist in life instead of making it my own. And like during COVID 3 years ago today, actually, I quit my corporate job.
Wow, that's a big day.
And
Congrats.
thank you. And I bring this up because I think so, like, I got a lot of unwanted feedback based on that decision and action in my life. And obviously, something like that triggers a lot of people um, who wish they could do it or what for whatever reason. But I bring it up because I think that we tell ourselves, like, well, I can't just quit my job. Like, it's not that simple. Or, like, I know this relationship is for me, but, like, I can't just leave it. It's not that. And people, like, make excuses or whatever. And, like, I think that if you are in a place where you know things are off, like you said, you just have this, like, gut feeling or knowing, like, there's more for me, but you're not really sure how to get there. And then you find human design, like, it can be awakening. Like, oh, okay, what do I do now? But I think that like coming back to basics, like it is all about using our authority, our strategy and authority, but like our authority to make the right decisions. And if you think about your entire life, like I like to ask people like what was the best decision you ever made? What was the worst decision? And if you trace back to like why you made that decision, I guarantee the best ones you didn't have a logical reason and the worst ones were based on something outside of yourself. So talk about like the basics, like your
Hmm.
strategy and authority or whatever you feel called, wherever you feel called to start. But like how can people really make it that simple? Like know that that is exactly what you need to lead you to where you're meant to be next.
Yeah. So I think what you're getting at in a beautiful way, and I love that asking people to kind of trace back the decision making piece is that, and according to human design, right? The real wisdom that we are supposed and the guidance that everyone is supposed to follow is in the body. It's not in the mind. So it's like neck down basically. And yet we live in a world that puts the mind on a pedestal in a way and says that the only good, valid, uh, the best decisions are always going to be ones that you can rationalize, that are based on logical reasoning, and that you can kind of, use your mind to back up or validate in some way, shape, or form. Whereas what human design says is like, no, the mind is actually the distraction. The real truth is in the body. And there's a few different places that your kind of inner compass can be within the body. And that's what in human design is called your authority, which is essentially that little voice that is never going to lead you astray. But it's all based on what feels most aligned and what feels most comfortable and what feels most calming and peaceful in the body. It's never what makes the most sense, per your point. So one of the first things when you learn about human design, the first thing you're going to hear about is your energy type, which there's 5 different energy types. You can be a manifester, a generator, a manifesting generator, a projector, or a reflector. And what your energy type tells you is really just how your energy is designed to be invested in order to get the greatest return on that investment. And it tells you about the natural rhythm or patterning of your energy throughout the day, week, year. And that's really helpful to know because, again, there is really one way of operating energetically that we see modeled out there, and that is put on that pedestal. And so understanding that not everyone is really built for a 9-to-5 job or built to parent in a way where you're doing all the things all the time, right? Or built in a way that they can actually have multiple careers and side hustles. So that's the first piece that you get to understand. And each of those energy types has a particular strategy or recommended way of moving through the world that is going to feel most easeful and effortless and supportive. Once you're doing that, the next thing to understand is authority. And this is that like inner compass that we were talking about. And this is the piece that I find I come back to every single day, like 100 different times a day, because there are technically 7 different types of authorities that a person can have. And each of those authorities has a slightly different way of speaking to you and helping you make decisions. If you know what your authority is, it becomes so much easier to kind of, one, understand the way that you make decisions, but 2, tune out the rest of the world, because all of the messages and the pressure that you are encountering on a daily basis are going to go straight to that mind and cause tons of distraction from that little voice inside of you that actually knows exactly what the next best step is. So, for example, my authority is emotional authority. If you have an emotional authority, so if you look up your chart, and I'm sure we'll give people a way to do that, probably it'll say type first with that energy type, and then the next line will be authority. If you're an emotional authority like me, you are meant to make decisions based on how you feel based on your emotions, your feelings, your moods. All of those are really, really important things to pay attention to, which incidentally is something that the world tells you is like a weak way to make decisions or a kind of biased way to make decisions. And in fact, we are supposed to make biased decisions based on how we feel in that moment. The thing about being an emotional decision maker is that we kind of have to wait for our emotions to settle, because they can be a little volatile and erratic. Like usually emotions, they come, I kind of describe that wave pattern, right? They come rolling in. There's this like big crescendo moment at the top of the wave where you're feeling all the feelings, and then the wave crashes, and eventually you find yourself kind of bobbing at the surface in more cool, calm, collected waters, where I talk about it as like the charge of the emotion is dissipated. So I still feel a certain way, but it's not as like all consuming of a feeling. And you want to get to that place before you make a decision, because if you make that decision when you're at the like top of your wave, you're not going to have the clarity around the actual kind of like core need or feeling. So wait for that, but still always make decisions based on like how you feel, how your body feels in a certain space, how it responds to a certain person. Like all of that is really important information to take in. Far more important than does this make sense or not. So I know I need to give my body space and time really before I do anything, before I respond to an email. Like your request for the podcast comes through. My first thing is I read it, and then I put my phone away and I kind of go about my day, and I wait until I'm feeling like, oh, wow, okay, the charge is gone. Now let me reflect on, is this something I'm actually excited to do? And for me as a generator, my strategy, right? I said there's like every energy type has a strategy for how they move. My strategy is really to respond based on how excited I am about something. And so I kind of let the emotion settle. And then I allowed myself to kind of play with those two pieces. Like, what is my response to this invitation? And like, how does it feel in my body? Does it feel like uplifting and energizing, or does it feel like a drain? And it felt uplifting and energizing. So then I respond, right? So that's one. You are a sacral authority, which means that for you, it's really about responding in the moment to the different options in front of you based on what your body language is like leaning into. And it really is about the drain versus the energizing activities. Like, you really want to move through your life just constantly paying attention to, does this energize or does this drain me? That's how the sacral operates. And that should be like the primary gauge for you for making decisions. Again, it's not always going to make sense. You're going to be in a restaurant and you are going to see, you're going to walk by a table and you're going to see something that's on a person's dish and you're like, oh my God, that looks so good. Like, wow, I want that in my body right now. Like, you feel your whole body, like you're almost going to like, grab a fork and just take it off that person's plate. Like, that's the response you're looking for. And then you sit down and you see what it is and you're like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense. I never like fish, or I never like this type of dish. And it's about then trusting your inner authority enough, trusting for you, your sacral, your gut enough to turn the mind off and be like, okay, no, I trust my body, because we have been so conditioned out of trusting that inner authority and our body, and kind of, again, spending too much time relying on the mind, whereas the mind has actually no idea what is going to be most supportive for you. So sacral authority, trusting the gut and your response to things. Then there's splenic authority, which is the like traditional sense of intuition, and that it feels like that ping that just drops in. And it's going to be like a yes, it's going to be like a feels good or doesn't feel good, but it's not as much of a physical response as the sacral is or the emotional might be. It is literally more of a like a mental, it just like drops in, and it's a knowing, like an inner knowing. It's kind of like when you talk about a little voice that talks to you, like that's really what the splenic authority feels like most of the time. But it's fleeting. The thing about the splenic authority is that that little voice will say something and then it'll be gone. And unlike the gut or the emotions, where you can check in with it, right? You can always drop into your gut and check in with like, is this still a yes or is it a no, right? How does this feel? What's my current, where am I on my wave? Like, you can constantly check in. Splenic authority, the voice will just say something and then it disappears. And so it's really hard to trust until you've practiced it enough and you have like that like faith in that little voice enough that you start to honor whatever that like initial response is or what that voice says to you, that you can actually follow its guidance. It's like when you're, I use this example of like, you're driving home from work, let's say, and this ping drops in of like, take a left turn. And you usually always keep going straight. And you're like, what? And you're about to take that left turn. And then your mind jumps in and starts to tell stories about like the future or the past, which is where intuition starts to get hazy and you don't hear it as clearly. So your mind will say, but what if you take that left turn and you get stuck behind that school bus again, like you have in the past, right? And so instead of taking the left turn, you miss it because you're kind of arguing it up the here in your mind. And then you get into an accident or there's a traffic jam and you're like, darn, I should have just listened. I knew, like, that voice told me to do something and I ignored it. So that's splenic intuition. Then we've got ego authority. Ego authority is where you are designed to be led by the heart. And the heart is also very much associated with your sense of self-esteem, self-worth, self-value. People who have ego authority are really here to operate in kind of a selfish way, in the sense that selfish in the best way possible. Like, when you are honoring what you want, literally what you want and what your heart is invested in life, everyone else is going to benefit from that. So again, we've been taught that we've got to be kind of selfless or self-sacrificing, but actually the most selfless thing that a person with ego authority can do is pursue their wants, like make the decision on what will serve you most first and foremost. Then we have self-projected authority, which means that you really, it's a very values-driven way of making decisions. It's like you want to make decisions that are aligned with who you want to be in the world, like what matters most to you and how you want to show up. And in order to get there, people with self-projected authority find it really helpful to have a sounding board that they can kind of bounce things off of, because it's almost like you need to get your thoughts out of your head, like either by speaking them in like to a person or in voice notes or writing them down through journaling. You need to get those things out of your head in order to find clarity. And oftentimes it really comes down to like, is this decision aligned with who I want to be and what matters most to me? But it's almost like you need to speak it out before you actually like have that aha. So if you go to a coffee shop, this is actually an example. I'll use this at the very end. So we have two more. We have one that's mental authority. Mental authority people are people who have a very active and brilliant mind that is constantly analyzing everything. Right? You are people who just constantly want to take in as much data as possible. You're always kind of assessing, evaluating. And this is a really important part of your decision-making process. Like step one is getting all the information, asking all the questions, doing the pros and cons list. But step two, and the most important part of the process, is then to let all of that go and drop into the body and literally give yourself time while you're just almost like marinating or sitting on all of that information that you've taken in. Then give it time to, I kind of literally see it's like it's running, it's processing. And one day you will wake up and your body will suddenly feel at peace, this sense of like calm and peacefulness around a particular path forward that is informed by the information, but it is a physical, you will know when your body is like peaceful and calm. It's a physical kind of almost like resolution. It's this feeling of resolution almost around a particular path forward. It's informed by data, but it can take quite a bit of time to figure out what path is right while your body is processing all of that information. And then the last one is no authority or lunar authority or external authority. Like there's lots of different ways, or outer authority of referring to this one. And this means this is the authority for reflectors, which is an energy type that only 1% of the world has. And reflectors are basically mirrors of their environment. They're at any given point in time, they are just reflecting the environment and the people around them. And so for reflectors, they can actually experience all of those 6 different authority types that I just described. They can feel like any one of them on any given day, depending on who they're with or where they are. And so for reflectors, really the key is to give yourself enough time to kind of move through all of those different sensations and feelings, and not get attached to any one of them, any of the arguments that come up, any of the data points that you take in, any of the responses that your body has. You don't get attached to any of them until you've had at least a full lunar cycle, so a month to kind of sit with something. And then similar to the mental authority, it's about really checking in with your body, and you will know the moment your body has found a resolution or knows its path forward, there will be this sense of like calm in the body. It's like your whole nervous system relaxes. But it takes the journey, and the trick is to not give in to the pressure that you will inevitably feel along the way to just make a decision, just choose already. So for example, let's think about like you go to a coffee shop, okay? These are how all these people will order, just to make it really practical. So you have this whole group of 7 people in the coffee shop, and one of like emotional authority person, me, will look at the list of things and say, you know what, circle back to me at the very end. I need some time. Okay. Because I'm going to be like literally looking, I'm like, ooh, I like this. Ooh, do I like that? I think I want the flat white, but I just want to wait and hear everyone else order before, it comes to me, and then I will know. So I give myself that time. The sacral authority next to me will look at the list and they'll instantly be like, oh, matcha, that's what I want. Like they need the list of options, but once they see that list, their body's going to respond to one of the things immediately. The splenic person is going to kind of stare at the list, and either the first thing that comes up is going to be what they want, or they'll hear someone in front of them order something in line and they're like, oh yeah, that's it, Americano. But it's going to be like almost no thought process at all, but it's not going to be as much of a physical response as that sacral person. Like they have to see the list. Like the splenic person might already know the moment they woke up that day, they might have already had I'm going to order an Americano. And so they walk in and they order that thing. The ego authority is going to be thinking about like, what do I really want today? What do I like? What am I craving? What does my heart desire? And so they might go for some like really crazy, like specific request latte, like the special horchata one, because it's like, this is a treat for me. I want this, right? That's going to be their order. The self-projected person is going to stare up at this list and is going to say, wow. Okay. Well, yesterday I had the vanilla latte and it was pretty good, but it was a little sweet. And so today I'm thinking maybe I should try just a regular black coffee, but that's so boring. They're literally going to go through their entire decision-making process out loud. They're going to like verbalize that. The mental authority is going to be at the back of the group, and they're just going to stare at this list of options and be going over every potential kind of ramification, thinking about if I have the Americano, I'm going to be wired, and then this could happen. If I have this one, it's a lot of milk. What if my stomach ends up hurt? They're going to literally go through every single option. And then at the end, the importance for them is just to like drop in and ask themselves like, okay, but what feels most like, what makes me feel most at ease in my body? Okay, this option. And the reflector is going to be very overwhelmed by everything. And they're probably just going to pick based on what they see the other people in the group doing, because those few minutes to make a decision are never going to be enough for a reflector to know. So it's just going to be based on what they're feeling in that particular day. So that was a very long-winded answer, but I feel like it helps bring it to life a little bit more.
Yeah, that was amazing. And I love, like I've told you before, your analogies and explanations are amazing. So I think the coffee shop, like everyone can relate to. And it's funny because part of the way through, I was thinking, like, I wanted to ask you, like, how that shows up. And then you already answered my question. But one of the things I want to touch on, so, like, when people find out their types and their like energy type strategy authority, let's say the basics, right? And I think something I hear a lot is like, but how do I know it's my intuition? How do I hear my intuition? And again, we talked about because it's like stripping away layers of conditioning and like the fact that the mind is never the authority, like it's about getting rid of that. Like I always just say like start with basics, like what do I want to eat today, and just let yourself use that. Like what advice do you give to people that are trying to like strengthen this muscle that they haven't used in 20 years or whatever?
I think what I usually say, exactly like you put it, is just start really small and start with some really basic things and just start to kind of pay attention. Like awareness is like the first step to all of this. Just becoming aware of like, okay, and this is how it worked for me. I'm an emotional decision maker. Wow. I've spent the past at least 10 years shutting down my emotions and not involving it in decision making. Okay, so what does that mean? I'm just going to start to pay attention to how I feel around things and when emotions come up and how long they last and the pattern that they take, right? So you just start like I think the first step is purely observing this thing in your body and really making it about noticing like the physical cues, especially if you are an emotional or if you are a sacral, like it's really about the physical. All of the authorities though pay attention to the mechanics for you, because again, like one person who's splenic it is just like it's this like fleeting knowing that just drops in. And for other people, they do hear a voice, right? So start to like just observe and then nail down the mechanics for you. And it may only show up around certain decisions that don't feel as consequential, as big. That's the thing. It's like when we're choosing what to eat, because we're not putting a ton of pressure on ourselves to make the right decision because it's like just a meal. It's an easier place to observe and practice, because when you get to the bigger things, there's all the pressure that you haven't yet learned to detach from at that early stage. So yes, I would say observe first, just like understanding how the mechanics work. And then just start practicing with really small decisions in your life and like challenge yourself. Like for the next 24 hours, I'm going to make every single decision based on that sacral, like physical response, like what feels draining and what feels energizing, like everything I'm going to, and just see how that goes. And you should, and I wanted to say I'll guarantee, but like I won't guarantee anything. You should see a notable difference just in your energy overall by starting to do that. And that's kind of how you get the flywheel going and the momentum going.
Yeah, I think like again, because we're so conditioned to use the mind, people want that explanation or whatever. And it's like, that's why it's called an experiment. Like, you can't circumvent that playing around with it yourself. Like, you really do have to, like, see, because, like you said, every person in the world is splenic authority. It could show up slightly differently. So there is no, like, answer that's going to give someone the certainty of what that feels like for them without them just playing around with it.
Yeah. And what I find actually super helpful, if you have kids, use your kids, because sometimes when you see certain things play out in someone else, it kind of helps you reflect on, oh, that's what it could look like, or that's what they mean when they say this, right? Like for example, my son is also an emotional decision maker. And for him, it's like so obvious because if you say, okay, we've got to stop, playing with this toy or watching TV, it's immediate like, no, like literally like this huge emotional reaction, which me as an adult, I'm like, God, I want to be like, why is he so emotional? I'm like, no, that's how I'm supposed to be responding to things that I don't like or when things change suddenly, right? And so I find it so helpful to be able to kind of study him. But even like my husband is a splenic projector, and his decision making is like so quick and it's instant. And it's like, we're deciding what to eat for dinner, and he's like this. I'm like, what? You don't even need time to think about it or look at the options. It's like, that's crazy to me. But it really helps to see it in other people. So if you're struggling to kind of like believe it or recognize it in yourself or connect, sometimes that can also be a really helpful way to just give you some like tangible examples too.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, and I love, let's get into the by design because it's one of the things. So I I moved in with my partner like I don't know, a year and a half ago, and he has three kids. We have them half the time. They go back and forth. And one of the things that like hit me I had already been like playing with my human design, but I was starting to explore a lot more like depth and details and digestion and all the things. And one of the things I was like, this picture that has been painted for us since the, I don't know, 50s commercials, whatever, or TV shows of like you sitting down all together at dinner, the wife cooks, puts the food on the table, the son, you ask the son like how his day was, like it's a conversation and it's like this wholesome family and like check, like you're a good family, you've made it, like success. And now I'm like, this is havoc. Like this is like he doesn't want to eat that. She's not even hungry. He needs music. Like he needs like calm. Like and so maybe start there because like you said, you notice things in your kids and that like drew you even deeper and in a different way to human design. Like, talk about a little, like, those types of things that just make shift the whole game for you with like human design.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because literally the other night. So I found human design to be like the best parenting tool ever because it's not one set of rules. It literally helps you understand why your child does not follow any of the other rules or why they're not responding to all the techniques. Like, I love the concept of gentle parenting, but it's not going to work for every single child, right? And so I think what ends up happening is all these parents are like, but I followed the playbook. Like, I'm doing all the things and it's not working. And the reason is because your child is like an individual with, again, their own set of needs and preferences. And it's like this unique combination of things that there obviously isn't going to be a book or a whole modality that is tailored exactly to them. So what human design allows you to do is it allows you to understand like how your child is like authentically designed to move through the world so that you can take something like gentle parenting and tailor it to them in the way that they are designed to communicate or learn or be disciplined or whatever it might look like. But it also gives you this incredible sense of like almost peace around the fact that, you know, you cannot control your child because they are like an individual, and so they are not necessarily a reflection of you. And also, like, you want to parent them not in the way that worked for you or the way that like your friend is parenting. You want to parent them in a way that's going to be most supportive and effective like for them. That's really hard to do unless you have something like human design that like gives you this blueprint. So it's funny you just said that, use that example, because my husband the other day was, so my husband is a projector energy type, and projector energy types tend to need a lot more alone time. Their energy ebbs and flows. And so generally they need a lot more rest, and they do best when they're able to kind of like focus on something and then pull back and reset and recharge. Parenting is like a 24/7 grind, especially when you have a 3-year-old manifesting generator boy. Manifesting generator energy is like a lot. It's like that energizer bunny that's going, 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 like from the moment he wakes up at like 5:30 a.m. until the moment he crashes. And he's interested in so many different things and moving around. Like, you know, you go in an airplane with him and you bring 10 different things, activities to do, and he spends about 3 minutes on each of them, and you still have 10 hours to go. And you're like, what are we going to do? That's a manifesting generator. So my husband was saying, he's like, but I don't get it. We must be doing something wrong, because if you think about our parents' generation, like they've just, all the kids just sat at the table and they just listened, and, you know, they didn't need to be disciplined and they didn't need this like constant engagement like our son does. And I was like, that's complete BS, right? They were just repressed. Like they basically were like forced to fit in this straitjacket. And that is why, as adults, they have tons of therapy. They're feeling unfulfilled. They're not doing what they actually wish, you know, they're not living out their purpose in the way that they potentially could have. Now, there's obviously a balance. Like I would like my son to one day be able to sit at the dinner table and eat a meal with us. But because I understand that, for example, my son is a passive eater in that he eats best when he is distracted. So I actually, when we go out to dinner, I bring like books and little games that he can play, because I know that he's actually going to eat more food that way. And if I try to like take all those things away and like, you're going to sit and focus on your food and engage with us, like he's going to be miserable. We're going to be miserable. And I have to ask myself, like, what is really the purpose of that? Like, I trust that he is going to be fine. He's going to be a functioning adult. And one day he will realize that like he needs to be able to be engaged in a conversation during a meal. But at 3 years old, do we really need to push that? Like, and especially when that's going against his like natural, authentic code. But if I didn't have human design, either I would feel like a failure because I would be like, our child isn't operating like those other children are. right? Or I'd be miserable because I would be like forcing something that is like never going to work. And it would affect my relationship with my son, with my partner, with his sibling, right? There's so many things that would be impacted by that type of pressure.
Yeah. I just like, I think like when you get to the point, like we were talking about at the beginning, of like saying, like, okay, something's off here. I need to do something differently. There's more here for me. And you get to the point like of like, okay, let's shift something or let's find something, right? Like you just start questioning everything. You're like, okay, well, I did that because I was told this, and it made me believe this. And like, is that even true? Is that how I want to live my life? And like, I just think for me, human design, like it like puts everything back on the table and we're like, keep that, toss that, like shift that, take it, but change it a little. And like, it's just permission to reevaluate, like you said, like probably people know, like, I feel like I've been doing this, but it doesn't feel like the right way for me. Like a lot of people probably are like, oh, that makes sense because like I didn't like this or that didn't feel good. But then it's just this like permission, like again, we all came here. Like the beautiful thing is we're all different. And then we all get to come together and create this amazing world together and like be happy every day for the most part and have days that are hard, but like get to do it our way. And like
Yeah,
you
I
said,
mean,
some,
it's crazy to think that all, whatever, 7 or 8 billion of us are designed to eat 3 meals a day at these intervals, right? It's like that is insane. And that we're still telling people that like for everyone, breakfast is the most important meal of the day and it needs to be the biggest meal of the day. And if you skip breakfast, like I totally believe that for the majority of us, that may be true. But there is a subset of people, like my son, whose digestive system actually doesn't kick in until later in the day. And so for him, actually, dinner should be the bigger meal to focus on in terms of nutrients. And breakfast isn't as relevant. And he does not eat until 10:30 or 11 a.m. And this is like again a 3-year-old child, and most 3-year-olds are like ravenous by 7 or 8 a.m. He just has zero hunger. So if I force him to eat that way, he's going to grow up and he may deal with like various like digestive issues, or he might be overweight, he might be underweight because he's forcing himself to eat in a way that isn't actually supportive. And he knows as the 3-year-old what's going to be most supportive for him. And all I need to do as the parent, I always say, like, a lot of the times, it's like we need to just do less as parents. We need to trust our children that they know what they need and like step back and allow them and their authorities to figure it out. And we create kind of like the safe environment for them to experiment and support them in that. But like that's really our only job. We are not here to determine and define how our child eats, sleeps, right? Like plays, all of that. They already know what feels best to them. And we're doing the same thing that was done to us in like cutting them off from that like inner guidance system. And that's what I'm really passionate about preventing in my work with parents specifically.
yeah. And I love that. That's why I love that you're doing this work because I feel like I don't have kids of my own, but I think, I don't know, maybe it's my son gate 13. I just collect stories and hear everything. And so I feel like I have a
Oh, I
good
love that
collection
you
of
have a
like,
podcast. This is so perfect. Yes.
so I feel like I just hear, but like, I feel like as a parent, your job is to like love your child unconditionally, encourage them to be uniquely themselves, and teach them how they make decisions in the world. And like I didn't have that verbiage until I learned human design, but I'm like it really is that simple. Like everything else is like up to them. Like their soul came here choosing you as a mom, like knowing who they wanted to be, knowing the lessons they need to learn, and like it is like you just need to maybe step back a little.
And guess what? It makes parenting so much more fun and so much less stressful and exhausting and overwhelming too. So it's like it's a win-win for everyone involved.
Yeah. What are some of the, because I imagine like when you work with individuals versus like parents and kids, it's a totally different dynamic and outcome of the things they see and learn. Like, what are some of the biggest impacts or permission slips that you give parents, like when you work with them learning their kids human design?
Well, I think first of all, and this is why I always start with the parent themselves and helping them figure out like what is the most authentic parenting style for you, because that's the
Mm,
other thing, right, is we feel like so much pressure to parent in a way that sometimes isn't actually supportive and is bringing out the worst in us. Like I said, if you're a projector or a manifestor or a reflector, your energy is not designed to be consistent. And so, like, I refer to parenting as a grind, this like constant thing. Like the kids' energy typically, or for most kids, rarely kind of takes breaks. And so, if you are one of those, like a projector, manifestor, or reflector, it's going to be really hard if you set the expectation that you're going to be able to kind of like match your child's energy and be on all the time. And so just giving people permission first and foremost to parent in a way that feels sustainable for them,
mm,
right? Like, no, if you're a projector, you want to work smarter instead of harder. So you want to figure out like what are the moments throughout the day or the specific kind of activities or events or milestones that I find the most enjoyable and easeful for me to do with my child. Double down on that and get support or help or figure out smart systems and ways to automate or outsource the other things. That does not make you a bad parent, because that is going to make you like be so much more present, and like it's all about quality over quantity for you, especially. So that's one example, right? As for example, with my husband as a projector, like if I expected it to be a 50-50 split for
mm,
in terms of like how we show up for our kids, like I would be very disappointed. And he would do it, but he would be exhausted, burned out, and very resentful towards the kids and towards me. So we figured out a system where I tell him, like, okay, well, I asked him, like, where do you feel most successful as a dad? What are the moments where you feel that? Okay, how can we optimize around those things, right? And also I say, okay, these are the things that I need as me as a generator. I need to fill my cup. So these are the moments I really need to fill my cup throughout the week, whether it's like a yoga class or a lunch with friends or a dinner with friends. And I'm like, can you show up for those? And it's like, yes, absolutely. If I know when I'm on and I can focus, I'm like
mm,
in for those things. But if I expected him to be like 24/7 or do every morning shift or do like that, anything that feels like this grind is really, really difficult. And we're all going to end up suffering if I have that expectation for him. So, first, I help parents like figure out what is a sustainable way to parent for you. Then we look at the child. And there's depending on the age of the child, I'll kind of like touch on different parts of their chart, right? So when they're really, really young, things like the digestion and that becomes like really important, because that's like they're not verbal yet or communicating, so that's the thing that you can really kind of work with the most, or environment and stuff like that. But then as they get older, right, you can start to look at some of the other dynamics, and we look at the common pain point things like sleep, like food, like learning style, and like especially if they're going to school, like figuring out what type of school environment and system is
mm,
going to be most supportive. Communication and discipline is obviously like a huge pain point, and figuring out how to do that. And then the biggest one is understanding how your child is actually different from you, because as parents we don't
mm,
realize how much bias we bring to the table. And so we have that very emotional 3-year-old toddler, and me as an emotional, I understand him. I understand that. My husband, as a non emotional, who is very neutral emotionally, cannot understand why he needs to like have that big emotional reaction about something that, he needs to go to school every day. So why is it causing him so much emotion? And like human design can help like just give you that tangible thing to look at, but also give you the language to understand, oh, he's opposite of me in the way his emotions work. That's why I don't get it. That's why I don't understand. It's not like there's something wrong with me or with him. It like almost takes, it makes it less personal. Let's put it that way. So that's the
Yeah.
other big, big value add of human design.
It's so funny because it's shifted like even the way I see like screaming kids on a plane, because it makes me, my reaction now is kind of like, uh, half the adults on this plane would be screaming like that, if it were okay. like, like most people are just as uncomfortable. They just have been
Yeah.
conditioned to like push it down.
Yes. And guess what? If you tell that child, oh, I see you feeling super uncomfortable. Like I feel that same, like you validate that feeling. Do you know how much more effective that is than saying like stop crying, right? Because
Mm,
that child is an emotional child, and if all they hear for the first 7 years of their life is stop crying, they're well, guess what's going to happen? They're going to shut that emotion down, and that's one of their greatest internal sources of guidance. So suddenly they're going to feel lost in life because they don't know what to listen to because they can't hear their emotions anymore because their parents kept telling them to like shut it down.
yeah. I love like how you touched on too when I asked about kids, like parents, because I think like I learned you had done a master class on connection charts, and I was like full on mind blown emoji, because I think we don't realize, again, like you said, it's one level to learn your own, but then it's like learning others and how you relate to them, and it gives permission, because again, another condition is like, okay, well, your relationship should be 50-50, and like if it isn't, then you're with a bad partner, and like maybe you should think about being with someone else who's going to be like a better parent. And it's all this stuff that's been shoved down our throats like over the years, and it's like, no. And if you think about it again, like even like you, so Manny Gen projector, right? Like you have the energy. So it's not like you taking more than 50% is going to make you resentful, because like you're made that way and you're able to go. And like, as long as you get what lights you up first, you can go, go,
Yes.
go. Like, so it shouldn't be 50-50. It should be like, so it, again, it's just another way human design gives us the permission
Yes.
to do it uniquely.
And also, like, I'm talking like the childcare isn't 50-50, but then if I think about other stuff around the house, he does way more because he's mind is like so he like make always like makes sure our cars are like washed and clean, like have gas in them because I as a generator, that does not light me up to go get my car washed or add gas. So like that's something that I literally put off and put off and put off. And he just jumps in the car and go does that. So it's like the grind stuff I do more of, but like in the grand scheme of things, that just frees him up to do the stuff that he's made for, which
Mm.
are so like which is so valuable again to me because it allows me to then show up with the kids and have the energy instead of being like drained from just having had gone to like the car wash and the gas station. Like that's a stupid little example, but it ends up actually I think netting out 50-50 overall, but it's just letting go of these like you said, these like preconceived like notions and norms around like what we should how we should operate within a family system or within a relationship.
Yeah, and it's like, again, how it should be. Like, so in the past, in relationships, like I would have been making more money. And then when I quit my job 3 years ago, like I haven't been the breadwinner in this relationship. But it's like I show up in a lot of other ways, and my partner is a reflector, actually. So,
Wow.
so like, but I'm like bringing energy, bringing emotional support, bringing everything like that I do in my coaching career, and like bringing that to him and the kids, and like seeing that. So it's like, it doesn't have to be this even thing. Like we all, again, get to bring our unique gifts. Like you said, our purpose isn't just like this, you're meant to be a singer, or you're meant to be a coach, or you're meant to be whatever. It's like we all have these pieces of ourselves that we're just meant to express in the world and share them in conversation with strangers and relationships and in any way that they show up.
Yes, 100%. It's not what we do, it's like who we are.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're like over an hour already. I could talk to you for like hours and hours on end. Let's end like, what's something you would tell someone who maybe has found human design, has started to play around with it, but feels overwhelmed or feels unsure of like where to go next or where to start? Like, not, I don't know, like cheerleading them or guidance or whatever. Like, what would you just say to someone to like, yeah, give them encouragement or what would they need to hear?
I would say that when you first find human design, it does feel overwhelming because first of all, the chart itself looks very complicated. And I always like to say it's like it's complicated for a reason because humans are it's complex, it's nuanced, it's layered. But there's a reason why kind of the deconditioning journey, as they call it, is supposed to take at least 7 years because you can't strip away all those layers all at once. It's literally like it's over time, as you know and are learning. Like you kind of like life initiates you into it, right? Human design finds you, and then slowly but surely it like sinks its teeth into you, and you get to do deeper and deeper work. But don't get overwhelmed. The biggest thing, like we talked about earlier, strategy and authority is like the place to start. And honestly, of those 7 years, probably 6 of those years are meant to be just strategy and authority. And then you are supposed to move on. But just because of the nature of like the way people work, and we all like to like jump to the more advanced things and the more specific things. So I would say start with strategy and authority, and treat it like an experiment, but give yourself like you need to see the magic in action in your life to truly believe it and to like continue investing in it. So challenge yourself to do 1 week or 1 month where you follow that strategy and authority. Just do that. Don't get, you know, distracted by everything else. Just do that for 1 week or 1 month and then check in and see how you feel. Has it made a difference? Has it shifted things in your relationships? Has it, right? Like, given you the ability to express your gifts more or in a different way? Like, just observe and pay attention. I think the reason why I started the Live Your Design community that you are a part of, a very big part of, is because that's what I wanted. I wanted to hold people's hands as they like were actually doing this work and experimenting with it, because it can feel a little bit lonely and a little bit isolating and a little bit crazy and overwhelming. But like that's really where the magic happens, and where you start to kind of like build the momentum to sustain it for like 7 years. Strategy and authority, and then just carve out like a week or a month to start and commit fully to it and see what happens. And if it doesn't make a big impact, maybe you're not ready for it yet. Maybe 2-3 years from that happens a lot too. People will come back and be like, I heard about it then and I tried to work with it, but it didn't really go anywhere. And then now I'm fully like in it and seeing all the impact and the results.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. I will put your Instagram and your website in the show notes so people can find you and learn more about what you offer, and just follow you on Instagram because you share amazing things that will help you even if you don't want to invest. Go follow Alexandra. Definitely.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me and for just being a human design champion too.
Yes. We need more. Nerd and champion. I will take
Yes,
that title.
I love it.
Thank you so much. And everyone else, we'll see you in the next episode.